Okay, so welcome everybody. And what we're going to do today is learn how to use our fill stitches that are built into our machine to do some custom work. Okay. What I'd like to say is you all have a hoop that is going to work for you and for your project. And right now today, there is a block we're putting into our project that the square is actually 9 by 9. That will entirely fit within our 10.5 by 16-inch hoop. But if it doesn't, don't worry, you can break your project down in segments. When you load your hoop, I'm going to swing this over. Your hoop will get loaded into your machine, and you can see I've done my best to center the package in the hoop. And I've done it. I've eyeballed it and I've done my best, and there are ways to arrange and rearrange for yourself. But the package is now centered in the hoop. Sometimes when you're hooping, you might with this run a little shy at the top and the bottom of your hoop. And I know when we do embroidery, we get very nervous about our stabilizer not being completely captured within the hoop. And I will say that if you're just off by a 1/2 inch or in there, this is a very forgiving process. Your batting is your stabilizer, but because I have backing, batting, and a top, it really gets into a hoop and stays in the hoop. And I love that about this process. Also with this process, I will say, we're going to start from the center block and work out. And usually with quilting, they like you to start from the middle and work out. So that's what we're going to do. So let me show you how I make this a reality. Let's come to the screen of our machines. And what we're going to see, and if you want to push buttons while I'm doing this, you can push buttons. The work that I am doing is in the IQ or my design center. So it's the very bottom down here. I'm going to tap my design center, and you're going to see that you get a paint palette of some type. And on this paint palette, what you're going to be paying attention to is this area up here, this little quadrant right up here. You might see a zigzag stitch up there. That quadrant and the 2 rows below it identify the lines you want to stitch. Okay. Right below it, you might see this box here, and it's usually filled with a satin stitch, but that quadrant right there is all about a fill stitch or a decorative stitch you want to add into a project. Okay. And down below are features surrounding editing. When I approach a project on any level, if I am going to be scanning, I always say to the machine, what's the first thing I want to know about lines? The default for our machines is to do a satin stitch. And many times when we're scanning an image, a satin stitch is not what we want. We're looking for a line, or we're looking for something different. So the first thing I do is tell the machine what type of line I want. And when I tap that line, and we're all going to get a chance to do this again later, we're going to be defining what type of line do I want to be drawing with? What type of lines do I want you to scan? And the first thing I do when I'm doing quilting in a hoop is this button right here. This is an awesome button. It looks like a satin stitch with a red line through it. And when I tap it, it's telling the machine that's a no-sew line. It's a no-sew line. That's really good and important to remember. Okay, so I've said this is the line I want. Now at the top of the Solaris and the Luminaires, there's a button that has a leaf on it. And when you tap that leaf, you're going to see a choice to do a scanned image, a choice to do a line image, and a choice to let the machine try to determine the picture all by itself. It's really unique. What we're going to be looking for is we just want an image scan. Now, for Dream Machine, that image scan looks like a flower in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. But in Luminaire and Solaris, it's going to be this leaf, and you want to say image scan because I don't want the machine to try to figure out what it's going to stitch. I'm going to tell it. I just want a picture of what I have in my hoop. So when I say scan, this machine will take off and it is going to begin taking a picture of what is in my hoop. If you're at home and you have a queen size quilt and you have something larger, you need to make sure you have space all around for a quilt that's going to travel. And your job is really going to be stand in front of the quilt and hold the weight that's presented in front of you. But ultimately, you want to make sure you're not creating too much drag on the arm or too much weight on the arm. And it will go through and do this just fine. Okay, here we go. So it's going through and scanning. Then the machine is going to recognize it and show you right on screen a picture of what we scanned. There's a scale here where you can darken your image or you can lighten your image. And I stay to the lighter side because the line you're going to draw is very faint. So sometimes I'll draw for a while and then turn off the image to make sure what I was drawing is actually there. So what happens with a fill stitch when you're going to put a custom fill stitch into your product, you have to create a closed shape. And that's our ultimate goal, creating a closed shape so that you can fill it. And I'm doing a no-sew line because I don't want that present to have a stitch line all the way around it. I just want it to do the quilting, nothing else. So here's how I do that. I promise you the picture on the camera is way better than what we're seeing up here. I take my pen. There is right under this lined area where we said we're going to do a no-sew. I can tap that again. The first question is, what type of line property do you want to draw? And there are choices. You can freehand curves, and whatever you draw, it will draw. There is the second one. I want you to close the shape. Whatever I draw, snap it closed. Whatever I draw, snap it closed. There's another choice to draw straight lines. Just you make it perfectly straight. I'm a little wonky, so it will do it nice and straight. And there is this zigzag, which means if I draw and then I draw over here, it like with angles will close your shape or continue your shape. For the sake of our project today, because we're working with angles and straight lines, I'm going to choose draw a straight line. Okay, now the machine knows what I'm asking it to do. And when I say okay, I'm going to come back to my picture here. And I'm going to show you how I do this. You're going to hear your machine make noises. You've heard my machine make a noise that sounds like bunk, bunk. If I hear knock, knock, it's like a bunk, cluck, cluck, knock, knock, whatever you'd like to call it. That's a machine saying, I already did that. I'm with you. I already did that. So if you're nervous that you asked the machine to do something and you're not sure if it did or didn't, try to repeat it and you'll hear that knock, knock, and you're no, I'm good. I'm there. So I'm going to draw a closed shape. It is not going to stitch my line. So if my lines overextend my pattern or crisscross or do whatever, that's fine. It's not stitching these lines. I'm just creating a closed shape. So if I come in here, I wait to hear that it engaged. There's that noise. And I'm going to draw a straight line. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to draw a straight line. And what I'm doing is following the yellow fabric. Drawing a straight line, and I'm going around the bow. Drawing a straight line, and I'm going to do it again. I'm extending into my boundary, my border, because I want to make sure Okay, now roughly we've watched what I did. Let me turn this off. Oh, you guys can't see as well as I would hope. We're going to do this again, and I'm going to turn the lights down so you can see this. What I'm seeing on the screen is that I came very close to drawing this box, but there's an area where the line is missing. And in an effort to draw that in, there's a way to zoom in on your project. And we're going to practice zooming because it's a lot of fun. You have a zoom and you have a panning feature that when you tap it, it allows you to move around your screen and see all the areas that you've drawn. Okay, I take it back. It did draw everything I asked it to. What is in my design right now is I just outlined the shape. And even if I hit the machine and said go, it would do nothing because it's a no sew line. What I now want to do is choose a quilting stitch that I'd like to fill it with. So I'm coming down to this next quadrant. I'm tapping it. And this is where we get to say, what do I want to fill that with? If you tap the grouping of circles to the far right and select, you have all those fill stitches to choose from. Okay. And you can go through and say, what would you like those fill stitches to be? And I will say, well, let's say for the first one, well, it doesn't matter what I choose. They're all going to be fun. I've chosen a design. I can tell the machine what color. Even though I am going to use a marigold colored thread, maybe to see it on the screen, I might choose a different color so I can see it better. Yellow never shows up on screen. So let's just say I did purple. And when I come back to that area that I filled in on the package and I tap, let's fill the inside there. Can you see it? It's like magic. So that's magic. Because the entire square fits in this area, I can bring that design back and go ahead and do all 4 quadrants of this package. Everything that I can fit the closed shape in, I might as well do all at once. But let's go back to what happens next. So I found that area, I've defined it, and I've chosen a stitch. The next thing we do is hit next. There's going to be choices for the Luminaire and the Solaris that are different from the Dream Machine. But for the most part, when you come in, you can choose how large do I want this design to be. So maybe you want to do something that's like micro tiny. And you might go down to, it goes all the way down to 50%. And when you say, okay, it's going to show you just how small that is. You'll get a real picture and you can go all the way up to 200 and be very large in that area. So I think I did like 70 on most of everything. And it was a nice balance for what I was doing. You also have the opportunity for your project to have a square stitched out around it. And when we're quilting, we never want that. So we say no. In embroidery, maybe, but for quilting, this will be turned off. The next one is if you want to skew your design. Sometimes if you like, this isn't circles, but one of the latest and greatest crazes is to do those pebbles. Like your quilter will put pebbles into the design. This button right here will do that. It's called random shifting. And when you say, okay, you'll see your design get wonky. And if you were doing circles, they would look like pebbles. For the sake of what I'm doing and the fact that everything I always like symmetric, I have to put it back. And then a very important button that is on the Solaris and the Luminaire is thickness. A embroidery design, triple stitches. Every stitch is a triple stitch, but when we're quilting, that may not be what we want. We might not want something as heavy of a triple stitch. So this bottom button says thickness. And when you tap it, it is on the heavier thickness. You will have it on the lighter thickness. Okay. So I'm going to go back one more time. And let's just say I'm going to draw. Now I'm not going to follow anything. I'm just going to draw. And I filled this design with that same pattern, right? Because you might in your present do all 4 quadrants of that package, or in a design you're doing, you might be putting more than one shape in that hooping. When I say next, and whatever is around the red box, there's a red box around what you're editing, okay? It's important to know that if you have similar things, there's a little chain link here. If you tap that chain link, it says, I will do it to every one of the fill stitches that are the same as that one. And then it will let me go in and say, I want all of them at 70%. And it will edit all of them at once. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. And we're going to get a chance to do this again, but I just wanted to have a chance to tell you how we're going to work our way through this and then give you an opportunity to play. Once you've decided everything is perfect and you love it and you want to stitch it, you're going to say set, or you're going to say memory. Yeah, first you're going to say memory. You're going to save it to your machine and say, good, it's saved here. Because what you do in My Design Center or IQ is separate from your embroidery files. Think of them as 2 different computers. So the file type that you're manipulating and maneuvering is different from what you're actually stitching. So we save this as our working file. We can say set. It's going to say, oh my gosh, did you save it? And you're going to say, yes, I did. And now we're in the embroidery machine and it's getting ready to stitch out. And you're going to ask yourself, well, I don't know that I trust you. So I'm going to hit embroidery and I'm going to turn on the projector. The projector is here and I can bring it up and say, do I like where this is going to stitch out? Sometimes you might say, oh, I could move it up a little bit. I think I'd be happier if I move that up a little bit. And you can perfectly position in place or do a minor rotating, etc., to make sure it fits in that open space. Another way to do this, and Dream Machine lovers will love this, you can hit this camera. So right above the word layout or above the word edit, you can hit the camera and it's going to let you scan. And again, we're going to be scanning the background fabric. But now that you're in the embroidery side, it's going to be superimposing your design on top of that scan. So you again can do some movement or rotation or whatever you'd like to do to ensure it's placed perfect. Now, whenever we've done quilting in the hoop, we've done edge to edge embroidery. We always use that term pretty darn close. Okay. If we're looking for absolute perfection, oh my heavens, there's just, I can't help. Pretty darn close is awesome. So now here it's scanned in. I can see the design right on my screen. And I can go in and to the move function and go ahead and scoot it around so that it is exactly where I want it to be. And then you should be able to trust that you can go forward and sew. If your machine has the light turned on green, it means it's ready to go. It's ready to do whatever you'd like it to do. And so I have a green light turned on. Here's the first thing I like to do. And this is all up to you how you want to proceed. There is a button on your screen that where we can advance to stitches. We can advance to stitch number 1. We can advance. It's where we back up our needle and do whatever. If you tap that button and you tell the machine +1 stitch, whoop. So you're bringing up this needle guide and it was right down here. It's a needle with a plus. You say +1 stitch. Your whole design is going to move. And what I'm looking for you to do is to hold your thread drop your needle, pull it up, grab that bobbin thread and pull it, because you don't want all those tails or that bird's nest to be at the back of your quilt. So then you can stop and hit go, and then it's going to stitch. I'm not going to stitch because it's landing on that crazy design, not my first one. It's going to go work with the last thing that I did. So with that said, you ought to be able to hit go. It's going to stitch everything out. And that's a process you're just going to repeat and repeat and repeat. Okay. So with that said, I'll turn Zoom off. Thank you. I hope you're at home having a great time. If not, I'm not telling you my phone number. No, that's it.